The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Welcome back to Hambleton again, everybody. The hoodie is gone. It's now getting quite warm today. The ironic thing is it was 4 degrees overnight last night, very, very chilly, and now the sun's out. Look at it, it's beautiful. Well, I'm hoping the sun is going to show off this place in all its glory, and I hope it doesn't burn anything. The word burn is very appropriate in this episode, as we'll see. This is Stillington. Stillington, Stifles Farm. Midweek time and we are midway through this run of Hambleton parishes. Here's one that looks like it belongs in the East Riding. After my walk around Stillington, that's the impression it gave me. Stillington is 10 miles away from York on the road to Helmsley. Arguably it's famed most for being the original endpoint of the Foss Navigation at Stillington Mill. The name is derived from a local Saxon settler, Stifle. It was mentioned in the Domesday Book where the principal landowner was the Archbishop of York. The church continued to hold the land here until 1616 when it was leased to William Ramsden. The lease was then granted to Christopher Croft in 1625 and the Croft family would hold the manor until 1895. As such, the Croft name will come up several times in this video. John Croft was a notable former resident of Stillington. This one is sort of in the middle of nowhere again. The nearest settlements are Farlington, almost 2 miles away to the east, and Hewby, just over 1.5 miles to the southwest. The B1363 road between York and Oswaldkirk runs north to south through the village, following the route of an old turnpike set up in 1768. The area around the village is farmland and much of the local business is still involved in it. There are some local enterprises though. These include a community-run post office and 2 pubs within stumbling distance of each other. There were 3 at one time, but the other one has now been turned into a restaurant. Otherwise, there's a church, a village hall, a school, a surgery and a sports field. It's a nice little place this, so time to go walking and take it all in. To begin proceedings, we're on a street called South Back Lane, and yes, there is a northern counterpart to this which we'll walk the entire length of later. Using this, we're making for the sports ground to begin with, and straight away that means we'll be covering a significant piece of Stillington history. You see, the farmland to the south and east of this street used to be a gigantic parkland, and it belonged to Stillington Hall, which has now been demolished. The parkland is still partially here, although a lot of it has been sold off and split up into fields. One patch of its northernmost reaches, named the Stripe, was turned into the modern sports field. Stillington Sports and Social Club was founded in 1959 when the joint committees of the village's cricket and football clubs purchased 6 acres of land from the church commissioners. Cricket has been played at Stillington since the 1840s, and it was done so on the Hall's parkland with permission of the Croft family who lived in the house. Members of the York and District League since the 1880s, the cricket club is still in full swing here in Stillington, but the village has a lot more in the way of sporting facilities. Football has been played at Stillington since 1899, and so it remains today on these fields. The tennis club was founded in 1976, and that can also be found on this complex too. A bowling green was created here in 1978, with a clubhouse added in 1997, thanks to the aid of a lottery grant. 2 squash courts were built in 1983, and as if that wasn't enough, Stillington also used to have a hockey club founded in 1979. That, though, has recently been disbanded. So before we go any further, we'd better cover Stillington Hall and the Croft family and learn about what happened to the building which no longer stands. Way back when, at the time of the Norman invasion, most of Stillington was owned by the Archbishop of York. In fact, the church owned a lot of the land until 1625. In the early 1600s, the manor was leased by the church, first to William Ramsden and then to Christopher Croft. He became Sir Christopher Croft when in 1641, as Lord Mayor of York, he was knighted for playing host to King Charles I. The manor remained in the Croft family until 1895, and during their time here, they built Stillington Hall, one of the grandest houses of all that had been lost in Yorkshire. After the Crofts left in 1895, the hall was owned first by Justice of the Peace Rawdon Thompson, and then by Matthew Liddell from 1903 to 1934. After a spell as a Catholic convalescent home and a boys' school, it was purchased by a builder, stripped, and became derelict. It was demolished in 1966 to make way for the Parkfield housing estate off Mill Lane. The parkland was broken up into pieces and sold. Today, most of it is farmland. Okay, so now that you know a little bit more about Stillington Hall and the Croft family, the rest of this episode should make a lot more sense to you. We're heading up now towards the main village, which is laid out in a nice elongated circle, like an oblong if you like. So I'll show you where we're going. There's a junction just up here. That'll be our end point when we finally get to the end point. We're going to take a right turn when we reach it, walk along the main street and then come back along a street called North Back Lane before completing the circuit by ending up at that junction. Very simply laid out. Let's go and check it all out. You rejoin me on the High Street where most of Stillington's main features are to be found. Perhaps the grandest of them all is the church, dedicated to St Nicholas. The current Grade 2 listed building dates from the late 15th century, but has been subject to various waves of rebuilding. There are records of an earlier 12th century structure predating this. Much of the present structure dates from 1840, and it has some good examples of furniture that display Robert Thompson's famous mice, if you know where to look. Stillington's first vicar, mentioned in records at least, was Peter de Topcliffe, who took up his post in 1329. The list of village vicars here has one name that stands out more than most. The Croft family, although mostly a modest lot, knew a few high-ranking figures other than Charles I. Stillington Hall was known to a few household names, in fact. One of these was a former vicar of Stillington, the novelist Lawrence Sterne. In 1745, whilst dining at Stillington Hall with Stephen Croft, he gave a reading from the manuscript of his new novel. Titled Tristram Shandy, Sterne felt it wasn't getting the attention he felt it deserved, and so threw the manuscript onto the fire. It was of course rescued and went on to make his literary reputation. Sterne is considered by many to be the father of the modern contemporary novel. One permanent legacy of Lawrence Sterne and Stephen Croft was their sponsorship of the 1766 Enclosure Act, which did away with Stillington's commons and its former open fields. Across the road now, we have a post office and general store. This is now the only shop left in Stillington today, but there were once plenty more. According to Victorian trade directories, the village was once served by its own shoemakers, blacksmiths, millers, butchers and saddle makers. In recent years, trade has declined, but Stillington is still very much an active community. This post office is a good example of the togetherness you can find here. When the postmistress retired a few years ago, the post office faced potential closure. Rather than lose an essential village amenity, however, the locals stepped in to help. The Stillington Community Association was formed in 2003, and now it runs the post office and the village store as a very successful cooperative venture. So Stillington does well for itself as a self-supporting community, and one thing it does have quite a few of are pubs, and you can find them all close together right in the centre of the village, not too far away from that shop or the church. The first one of them is on the left hand side, just there, but you won't be getting any pints in that one. Okay, so in terms of pubs, Stillington has 3, and they're all within a few yards of one another. It's the perfect excuse for a pub crawl, not that I advocate that. 2 of them are still pubs, but the third one is now a restaurant. That one's first. This is Gulshan Tandoori, which occupies the former White Dog. Now, I've no idea if he still runs this, but according to an article I found dated 2004, this was operated by a man called Alam Hussain, who was born in Bangladesh and came to England at the age of 5. Whilst many Indian restaurants create dishes especially for the European palate, Gulshan prides itself on creating more traditional Indian recipes. Gulshan has proved very popular with the locals since it arrived, and it was even nominated for the Restaurant of the Year in the Flavours of Hambleton Awards a few years ago. So let's have a look at the pubs that are still serving drinks. This one is called the Bay Tree, although it originated as a coaching inn called the Bay Horse. In 1884, a local man named Edmund Backhouse was caught attempting to steal oats from a granary near the Bay Horse. I wonder, what was his punishment for that back then? This pub has undergone various renovations and changes in ownership of late, including a recent refurbishment and relaunch in February 2022. Okay, we'll get to the third pub in just a second, but before we do, we have to check out this building next, which is between the Gulshan and the other pub which we're about to come to. Now, this is the school, and as far as school history goes in Stillington, it's quite involved. It centres not just around this building, but another one at the end of the village too. Between the two pubs on the same side as Gulshan is Stillington's primary school. This is not the first school the village has ever had to its name. It was built in 1907. Education in the village can be traced back to at least 1821. That's when a national school was built on the green in the eastern reaches of the village. It was founded by Harry Croft, the Lord of Stillington Manor at the time. He donated land on the green at the instigation of his uncle Robert. Its charter allowed for up to 36 poor local children to be educated for free, with the remainder paying a small fee. We'll see where it once stood in a little while. To the White Bear now, the other pub that's still going strong. This is a traditional North Yorkshire pub that's run by husband and wife team Phil and Sue Robinson. Originally built as a house, the White Bear became an inn in the 1700s and was used as a stopping point by stagecoaches travelling from Leeds to Helmsley via York. Few changes have been made to the historic pub since those days. The biggest ones, I suppose, would be the enlargement of the kitchen and expansion of the bar. These have created more social areas where families and friends can gather, but the essence of the inn remains true to its 18th century heritage. So I've just noticed something. The further north we go through Yorkshire, the closer we are getting to Newcastle and to Sunderland and to Middlesbrough, basically the northeast, if you like. And I've just heard the first sort of hint of Geordie in someone's accent. We're still miles away from Newcastle, but the closer we get, the more likely we are to hear that. Next, we have a chapel to look at, and then a pair of gate pillars which stand at the entrance, or the former entrance, to Stillington Hall. Set back from the road, our next job is to check out the Methodist Chapel. This was opened in 1972 as a replacement for a series of earlier chapels dating back to 1767. One of the earliest Methodist preachers in Stillington was Robert Spence, who was born in 1748 in the village. He was a groom to Lawrence Sterne, but was dismissed when he became a preacher. In 1767, Thomas Wilkinson built a Methodist meeting house above a joiner's shop on the western side of the village green. That's considered to be the first chapel in the village. Between 1785 and 1818, George Walker built a Wesleyan Methodist chapel on a patch of land he owned on Main Street. That stood here, where this building is today. In 1844, it was replaced by a new chapel capable of holding 400 people. It lasted until the 1970s, when it was decided it was far too large. A row of terraced houses now occupies the site of most of it, and this one was built on the remainder of the land. Now, although the present main road through the village is fairly straight, there's a bend at its eastern end, and it's quite a sharp one actually. Where it bends, there's a pair of pillars which donate the former entrance to Stillington Hall. Now, it has been suggested that the road originally continued eastwards in a relatively straight line. However, its course was diverted across the village green in order to provide greater privacy for Stephen Croft. It's amazing what money and power can do, right? And of course, if you were to go down the public footpath, which is now there between those gate pillars, it would take you to where Stillington Hall used to stand. We're not doing that though because it's just generally all housing and not really interesting. There is another hall to speak of though, which is next on our list, and it's here on the next corner. That right there is Stillington Village Hall. So now we've rounded the corner at the eastern end of the village and we're at the village hall on the green. This started its life as the National School in 1821. It became redundant in 1907 with the opening of the present primary school, and after 20 years of underuse, many community activities once held here had moved away. Serious concerns were raised about the repair of the building, and in 1928 a public meeting was held to discuss the matter. The decision was made that the old school shouldn't be allowed to simply decay, but that it should be used as a parochial hall for the benefit of the community. Funds were raised by public subscription and a grant from the church commissioners. These funds enabled the old school to be completely renovated. It was practically rebuilt actually by local builders Wood & Sons. The village hall was opened in 1929 by Matthew Liddell, the owner of Stillington Hall at the time. 1962 saw further changes, with a large extension being added to the facade. This contained a lobby, toilets, a storage room and a committee room. At that time, the foundation stone was moved to its present position on the north wall of this new addition to the old building. Today, the village hall still plays a large part in Stillington's community life. Major refurbishments during the last few years will enable it to continue in that role for many decades to come. This next section will take us down North Back Lane all the way to the other end of the village. There's only one landmark down here, the Surgery. Otherwise, this is all residential. Stillington has always been a pretty big village. In 1881, the population was recorded as being 600, which at that time was seen as quite substantial. By 2001, the population had risen to 741, and there were 326 households. Today, there are 340 dwellings, of which 155 are detached. It's still steadily growing. This place has seen some notable residents in its time. The Croft family, of course, are the ones that stand out the most, and I suppose you can count Lawrence Stern in that number. Another member of the Croft family that was well known was John Croft. Born in Stillington in 1732, he was an English wine merchant in both York and Porto in Portugal. Porto had Croft family connections, hence the link with Stillington. After a period in Portugal, he returned to York, where he worked as a partner in the wine merchants George Suttrell & Co. The fifth son of Stephen Croft, he gained the freedom of the city of York in 1770, and in 1773 was one of its sheriffs. He became a well-known, eccentrically dressed local character. He was also known for his antiquarian and literary interests. He held the nickname Scrapina from one of his works. He died in 1820 and he's now buried at York Minster. Stillington also had another resident who left a permanent legacy, most notably within English gardens. His name was George Russell, and no, I don't mean the F1 driver, he's from King's Lynn. George Russell, who was awarded an MBE, was born in the village in 1857 and worked most of his life as a jobbing gardener in York. It was he who created the Russell lupin, which commonly grows along streams and creeks, preferring moist habitats. He spent 2 decades single-handedly trying to breed the perfect lupin, crossing one or more annual species. Over the decades, the plants he selected developed flower spikes that were denser, larger, and more colourful than the original Lupinus polyphyllus brought to the UK from North America in the 1820s. He was slightly overawed by his fame and always maintained that the work in developing it could be attributed to the humble bumblebee and not himself. It's a long old road, is North Back Lane. We're about halfway down it and we've made our way to the surgery. That's this building right here. So now we've reached the surgery, which is about halfway down North Back Lane. It's nothing greatly special, but it is great to see a village like Stillington has a surgery at its disposal. It has a small and friendly team of local doctors and advanced nurse practitioners. Stillington Surgery also has treatment hubs in both North Rydale and South Hambleton. Let's continue down North Back Lane. The reason Stillington has two back lanes is all down to the medieval layout of the settlement and the open field system once used by the villagers. This criss-crossed pattern of country lanes have developed from what used to be strips or bulks that gradually became thoroughfares used by travellers. North Back Lane has a footpath that stretches into the adjacent fields. It's known as Lucy Bulk, and there's a reason for that. Rumour has it that it was named after a witch called Lucy who was hanged from one of the trees along the path. These back lanes were originally for rear access, and it's only in recent times that they've been termed North and South Back Lane. Both have seen improved surfaces since housing development began in the 1960s. A third back lane to the southwest has been left in a cruder form because housing has not yet developed there. It would appear a couple of the locals know that story about Lucy the Witch because the house opposite the surgery has a shed, and on the side of the shed there's lots of witch related things. I should have filmed it really, but I didn't really want to put my camera towards someone's private garden, which is fair enough. I'd much rather put it towards this thing actually. At the end of the road there's a pond which looks fairly dry at the moment, to be honest with you. Now Stillington has a bit of a history with water features. Let's discuss that next. So at the end of North Back Lane, Stillington has a small pond. I guess you could call this a mere, right? See, I told you there were reasons why this looks like an East Riding village. The presence of water around Stillington is nothing unusual. The village grew along a ridge of high ground running east to west, above what would have been a very marshy ground to the south. The road that runs southwards from the high street is called Car Lane, and that makes perfect sense. In Old Norse, the word car means marsh or marshy woodland. Within living memory, the land to the south of the village was so wet sometimes it forced vehicles to divert their route. There were two permanent ponds by the side of the York Road. One dated from 1767. It was gated and the lord of the manor provided it as a watering place. These ponds no longer exist. Neither does a former lake on land north of Rosebery Hill. That was perhaps a fishing house or summer house used by the Croft family, I guess. Whilst the road system of Stillington has changed little within the last 200 years, some of the roads or lanes have become known by different names. Their width and surface structure have been altered too in order to cope with increasing traffic. This east to west route is generally regarded as the oldest of Stillington's highways. This was a turnpike. In 1768, the York to Oswaldkirk Turnpike Trust was formed. Records for 1772 to 1817 show trustees meeting in several houses in Stillington, including the White Bear and the former Boot Inn. The trustees included the major local landowners, Lord Fairfax of Gilling, Lord Fauconberg of Newborough, the Duncombe of Helmsley, and the Harlands of Sutton. Of course, also involved were the Crofts of Stillington, and even Lawrence Sterne got in on the act too. Sidney Smith, the celebrated cleric and journalist and rector of Foston for 20 years, was also a trustee, but in 1829 he was moving on and relinquished his trusteeship. Well, from my time here, I am very approving of the Stillington residents, but I'm especially approving of the ones that live in this house over here. You can see there's a banner flying outside their window there which says Liverpool Champions 2024-25. A good example of how the roads have altered in recent times can be found where the High Street meets Carr Lane. As well as the Wesleyans, the Primitive Methodists also had a presence in Stillington at one time. Their chapel was built in 1866 and it stood at the junction of Carr Lane and the High Street. It closed soon after the Methodist Union in 1932 and became a cycle repair depot operated by a Mr. Morse. During World War II, it was used to store waste newspapers for the war effort. The building was pulled down after the war in order to widen the road junction, which explains why there's such a vast open space here today. All that remains now is to walk back to where we started on South Back Lane, having ambled around the entire village. Well, almost. No visit to Stillington would be complete without a look at the building that used to stand at the end of the Foss Navigation. Come with me to Stillington Mill. I think I caught that lorry with the traction engine on it. I seriously hope I did. It was absolutely amazing. If not, unlucky, but never mind. So we're on South Back Lane and the car is literally within sight. We're going to hop in that and check out Stillington Mill. Dominating Mill Lane, which runs to the east of the village, Stillington Mill is a thing of beauty, and it's probably the place's finest building. There's been a mill in Stillington since the time of Doomsday, but this isn't that one. The current building dates back to around the 1750s. The mill was closed for business in 1962 by its then owner, Geoffrey Shepherd. His family had owned Stillington Mill for over 90 years. The original mill house, which is no longer standing, dated back to the reign of James I. Today, the rest of it has been turned into a dwelling. The conversion of the mill successfully retained and preserved many historical features, which can be seen both inside and throughout the mill grounds, including remains of the old sluice. This is more than just a home though. The current owners use it as a business premises too. It's used as an events venue, and pretty frequently too. Theatre, music, food, workshops, you name it, the mill has done it all. It's been a success ever since its owners moved in back in 2014. Numerous individual artistic productions have been created in its on-site studio and performed in its gardens, and it's hosted a number of special events, including one-off gatherings, shows and gigs. Stillington Mill is famous for another reason. It was a watermill, of course, and so not far away from it, there's the watercourse it stands on. We know this, but it's been a while since we saw it last. This is the River Foss, which we saw in places like Haxby. Stillington Mill was supposed to be the end point for the Foss Navigation, a scheme which canalised the river and allowed for transportation via riverboat. However, the canal never reached the mill, and here's why. The Foss Navigation Company was formed in 1793 and had the power to purchase land and tenements as required. It could do that in order to make and maintain a navigable communication for boats, barges and other vessels from the junction of the rivers Foss and Ouse in York all the way to Stillington Mill. In April 1794, the work began, and it saw several locks and navigable cuts made all the way along the river as far upstream as Strensall. So far so good, everyone thought. Until that point, it had been surveyed by our favourite canal engineer, William Jessup, but much of the actual work by the company's engineer, a Mr. Moon, was not satisfactory, and he was dismissed. That meant some remedial work was required, and money was starting to run short. Further funds, though, were required in 1801. After a new engineer, a Mr. Scruton, came along, there was a disagreement as to what route the rest of the canal should take. The options were either follow the river course between Strensall and Sheriff Hutton Bridge or cut a brand new canal across the countryside. The shorter but more expensive canal route was eventually chosen, but it had a drawback. By taking that option, there was no longer enough money to extend the waterway as far as Stillington. The navigation therefore terminated in a basin half a mile west of Sheriff Hutton Bridge. This work was completed in April 1805 when the whole navigation was opened. And folks, we are done with another village in Hambleton. These are just getting better and better this week. I reckon the jewel in the crown this week is coming next. Tomorrow we're off to a place that has a castle that sits high on a cliff. That cliff gives the place its name too. Join me there to learn about them both. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.